But yeah, so City of Austin, Austin Water, how many environmental labs do we have? I've been trying to get a count. Ooh, there's more than I thought. Yay. We're a growing number. Last conference there were 2 of us, so we're a growing number. That's always fun and good. But yeah, so I like to kind of share my workflows a little bit. We kind of did a backwards implementation. Most people, when you got your Qualtrax, probably the first thing you did was document control, and you had document control for probably 6, 8 months or something like that before you even started looking at workflows. We did the opposite. We actually had Qualtrax for almost 2 years working with workflows and training and stuff before we ever got document control up. In fact, that was just February 18th that we got, this last February 18th that we actually got our document control up. So we actually purchased it. We already were using like SharePoint, things like that for document control. So it wasn't our biggest need to start with. Our biggest need for us was we had too many things falling through the cracks. So I'd have documents that were, they'd ask me, hey, can you approve this and approve that? And I'd get an email and you get busy and you kind of, okay, that email, I'll get to that one later. And then 6 months later, they're like, where was that document I asked you to approve? Or the biggest ones being our internal audits and corrective actions, things like that. You'd come out with a great plan and it's all sketched out and it looks all great, but then you get ready for your audit and you're finding out that, oh, we have no documentation for anything that ever happened. Did it even happen? We don't even know. And so that was kind of our biggest issue, was trying to track corrective actions. That was how I sold Qualtrax to my management. It actually took me 3 years to sell Qualtrax to my management. I tried for 3 years to get it and finally got it. So back in the day when we were trying to track our corrective actions, we used to probably do a lot of people, we used our spreadsheets, which is a lot of manual work. Every time somebody does anything, you have to go in the spreadsheet, mark it off, that it was done or wasn't done. The same thing, our root cause preventive actions. This is just our tracking form. We actually had the actual full root cause corrective action form that had, what the root cause was, what the corrective actions were going to be, what the preventative actions were going to be, when each of those things were going to be validated, and all that. It was just all one big form. But then to go through all those forms all the time was going to be kind of a pain. So we created the spreadsheet to kind of give us a summary of what was supposed to be done and when it was done, if it was done. And when training was done, things like that. But we were always kind of behind on this. And even that, if you notice, the lab services, I forgot to mention, I meant to put a slide on this, but I forgot. But we actually have 3 different labs. We service 3 drinking water plants, 2 wastewater plants, and a biosolids facility. So we're kind of spread out all over the place. And so what you're seeing here, this is just for one of our labs. It says EAS, that's the designation for one of these labs. So over the course of the year, I would actually have 4 of these spreadsheets, one for each lab and then one for just general division QA type stuff. And then you can see there's also individual tabs. So that's 16 basic different spreadsheets that we would have to maintain to keep track of everything. And that you have to go through all of those. And my manager was like, I want an update on how these things are going because they weren't getting done. And so this was a nightmare. And we finally just got to where when it came to audit time, we just couldn't keep up with it. Nothing was getting done. There was, it's one of the things that I hated about it is it's the low visibility. Everybody just forgets about it. You go, you do the corrective action, you write it all down, and then you get busy and you forget you were ever supposed to do it. Or half the time you did it because it was a quick fix, but then it never got documented. And as you know, in an audit, if you don't document it, it didn't happen. So that was the biggest thing. And because it was low visibility, there was also very low accountability. It was hard to say, why isn't this done? And to stay on top of them, to make sure that they actually did it. So of course, then you have deadlines missed and things continue to be problems, expired reagents still continue to be used or whatever it happened to be. The problem still continued because you never really got a fix that you could verify and check. So again, we started workflows and This was one of my first ones. I'll actually show you my actual first one later. But this was one of the first ones. And when I was building it, Patrick's like, why are you starting with the hardest thing possible? Because my workflows, none of them are simple. Even from the very beginning, if you look, my workflows are all color-coded based on who is responsible for that step. We don't get fancy into all the different shapes. But the only thing I do have a little bit is for the automated stuff is going to be the gray. So I know when Qualtrax is doing something versus me. And so I was already in my very first workflow doing data copiers and workflow launchers and all that kind of fun stuff like that. And every time I showed somebody Qualtrax, it's like, why are you doing that? Because that's the way I needed it to work. So basically, this was, again, how I sold it was corrective action. So this was how I started out. And what it starts out is we have a nonconformance workflow to start with. That, that's your determining your root cause, corrective actions, preventive actions, things like that. Then after it goes through all the regular review steps like normal, then we get the workflow launcher and actually launches out individual corrective actions or preventative actions. Because that's the hard part. That's actually the tricky part of the tracking is, did each individual CA or PA get done? So I'm going to go through real quick, just kind of show you what each of these look like. So the nonconformance is just our old form that we used to have. I actually mapped out at one point a document because they kept saying, this is so different, this is so different. I said, no, it's the exact same thing. It's just in a different format. When you look at all the fields that are in each of these steps, they match a field that was already in the document, with a few exceptions. A few exceptions being things like maybe a category for the type of nonconformance. We weren't doing that very well. So later when you're looking at, like, say, management review, we'll talk about this later too, but when you're talking about management review, things like that, you can actually pull up and say, okay, well, how many issues did we have with PTs? How many issues did we have with, sample receiving? How many issues did we have with, and you can actually start going through and figuring out where your weaker spots of your lab are and where you need to concentrate on. One little thing I did put in here, a little arrow to kind of show, is this finalized? And I still keep getting fight back from the labs. As you know, I say this all the time, everybody hates the emails. Everybody hates it. That's the one complaint everybody has about Qualtrax. But I keep reminding them, if you do what you're supposed to, you'll stop getting the emails. So there's an easy fix for that. But so one of the other issues that I keep getting from some of my supervisors is that, well, not everything needs a full corrective action. It was a one-off, or it was one little thing, or something like that. So I eventually added in this one little shortcut straight to finalize. So if it is a one-off, you're not having to go through all the documentation of the CAs and the PAs and stuff. A lot of that would just go into like a little comment box that's already in the rest of the workflow. And I'll go straight to final. But the nice thing is this is still in my system. I can still look at all these issues. And then when you say, oh, it was a one-off, and you start saying, I think I remember that this happened like 6 months ago, I can go back in the system and say, okay, yeah, oh yeah. And you can start, again, search on the type of issue it was, or a keyword or something like that that's in the description. And you say, oh, you said this was one-off, but it's actually happened 4 or 5 times in the last 2 years. And now you can launch a new one and say, hey, this is actually a systemic thing, and you start work on it. So it is a complaint that I have from some of my supervisors that I'm being a little too overbearing, I guess. But I'm like, it's the only way to find out if something's really systemic or not. And I have to keep reminding them that that step exists, that the finalized step exists. But the problem I have with them is that they start here, and they don't start with anything back here. And they don't, oh, it was just a one-off. They don't even look at a root cause or anything like that because they just assume it's a one-off. I'm like, no, I still want you to do me a root cause. I still want you to think about possible preventatives or correctives. And if you come to the determination it was a one-off, then we'll treat it like a one-off. But you can't start off with that assessment from the very beginning. And you can stop me, ask me questions. And I have all these exported already. So if anybody has thumb drives or anything, or just get my email, I've emailed these workflows to several people. I know when Patrick was out at GBRA, she's actually doing a talk later, she's like, do you have any workflows that you can send me? I was like, oh, sure, yeah, here. And I just emailed the workflows. And that's one of the greatest things I love about Qualtrax, is being able to share. But this is my preventative and corrective action workflows. They're both basically the same except just a few little word changes. So instead of where you see corrective, it says preventative or something like that. But the workflow itself is identical. And it just, you complete your action, and then it goes to verification from the supervisor. Then I do my verification. And then, again, to make things complicated, I got my data copier to send the data back up. Because sometimes things get updated a little bit. Maybe you tweaked your root cause a little bit. Maybe you tweaked what you ended up doing in the end, your corrective action or whatever. Your means to document, whatever it happens to be. Maybe you tweaked that a little bit. And so that data copier will send all that data back. And so your original nonconformance workflow will have all the updated information. So you got that. And then, of course, the reminders. That's, again, one of the greatest things is now you have that visibility. They're constantly reminded, hey, you've got this PA to do. Hey, you need to do this. You need to do this. Between their inboxes and their emails, they're constantly getting the reminders to do it. Did I go backwards? Oh, no, I'm going forwards. Okay, so after the data copy, after it goes through the waiting for the data copier to come back, then I get one more chance to just look it over one more time, make sure it all is good. One thing I did have an issue with this with I had a recent T&I audit in February, and one thing they didn't like was that a lot of my corrective actions are still open. Like, they've been open for a while. Well, the reason why is because they were still stuck here. I do most all my validations, the QA validations during my annual audits, because I'm already in the lab. It's real easy to kind of do it. I mean, that's the way the auditors do it. Mine do it the same way. So it looks like they're all still open. So sometimes it's real good to make sure to pull those reports to show why something's still open. If it shows that it's all waiting for QA verification, if that's the step they're all in, then it's easy to explain that. So you can just kind of look at that step and then it kind of explains. So what I found is that, again, it keeps things visible. And because things are visible, now you can increase that accountability, because you always get that case like, well, no, I told you I did this and you haven't done anything with it. No, it's still in your box. That means you're still responsible for it. That whole he said, she said, passing back and forth. Then I thought you had done that. I mean, I get that a lot. No, I thought you had done it. No, I thought it was in your court. The centralized place for documentation. When you go for your audit and you have to start showing all the evidence that things were fixed, and because at least for the state of Texas, they're getting really big at the ways to show that, what we call it, ways to document. And so if it's an email or updated document or whatever it is, they want to see that. And so by being able to upload all that into the workflow, now I can just pull all that right here and I've got all the evidence. I don't have to go pilfering through emails or filing cabinets to get all the documentation. It's all right there in my workflow. And then recall for future issues. Again, the nice thing is you can search. You can put keywords into the description fields, or I've got several name boxes where you kind of give it a short description. Or again, you can search by lab group or whatever it is. You can pull all this stuff up pretty quick and easy and see, did this issue happen before? How often is it happening? What it won't do. It won't be people do it. And I found that out. One of the other things when it came to our audit, we actually got dinged on, and I talked to the auditor, I flat out said, you need to ding us on this. Because I can't get the lab to listen to me. And I keep telling them, we have the tools to make corrective action easy now, but you still have to do it. We have some corrective actions that date back to 2017 that are still in the root cause step. That's the very first step in my nonconformance, and it's been 2 years. They're still sitting there. And I cannot, for the life of me, push my supervisors into doing it. So I was like, hit me. But what I was able to do when the auditors were here, I ran a report of every nonconformance we've had since we started with Qualtrax for 2 years. We had 55 of them. And I was able to give them that report, and they could see where everything was at, every step of where everything was at. And they could go through and say, okay, I see this is still in root cause. This is still in root cause. So in that case, it didn't get me out of a finding, it actually helped me reinforce the finding I needed to help myself. So that was kind of fun. But you still can't make people do it. You can only prompt as much as you can. So if your problem is getting people to actually perform the action, this can't help. But what it can do is it can at least put the pressure on a little bit. And again, make it more obvious that something needs to be done. Because honestly, with the exception of a few people, most of the issue is just people forget about it. They get busy with the business, you know, emergency hits, they can't get to it, then by the time emergency is over, it's out of sight, out of mind, and there's just nothing to refresh their memory. Hey, this is still sitting in the back end. Like I said, I make things complicated. So what we decided to do was take this a step further and apply this to our audits, our internal audits. And actually, I'm using this exact same thing, our same exact thing for our external audit as well. I'm just inputting everything that they gave me in their report, and I just copy pasted it over into Qualtrax. So I'm using it for all audits, basically. And all I did was added one more layer to it, because what is an audit? It's just a list of nonconformances. So now I have an audit up here that we put all our evidence and things like that in it. We send it to the lab just to get their feedback. Do you understand what the finding is? Do you understand? Was there something that we missed when we were in there and you forgot to give us some piece of information, or the person that was talking to us didn't know that piece of information? So we kind of give them a chance to kind of work through the audit real quick. Then it goes, and again, we got another workflow launcher, and then it launches nonconformances for all the findings. So, and then we also, the way I do it, I have what I call observations. They are things that I think we will probably need to look at as preventative action measures. They're not really findings in the sense that they're, but I see them as a risk. And so when we launch out the observation workflows, they're risk-based assessments. So that's what it refers to as a risk assessment. And that's what they have to give me, either a PA that you're going to do to fix this issue, or a risk assessment that says we are already mitigating this, we don't need to do anything further. So it's something they have to address, but they don't have to actually do anything about. So so my audits are actually 3 levels deep. Like I said, I like to complicate. So we like workflows. Again, I don't even know how many workflows I have, to be honest. We've just kind of started with them and just kept on going with them. We have all sorts of things. One of my new ones, my favorite ones, is the question comments. They aren't using it quite so much yet because it's still brand new, but on their end it looks like an email. It's got a subject, a text, and an attachment. So that's what it looks like on there. But when they send it to me, what it allows me to do is keep everybody in the loop. This is it right here. One of the things that I've always gotten complaints. I do a survey with the staff every other year. I don't have time to do it every year, so I do it every other year. And one of the things is they never know what's going on. Or inconsistencies, like one lab will ask me, hey, I've got this situation, what do I do? Another lab asks me, hey, I got the same situation, but it's a little bit different. I'm on a different day. I'm in a slightly different mood when I answer it, whatever happens is. And I give 2 different answers. We used to call him Santism. One of our previous QA auditors was notorious for that. His name was Santi, so we call them Santisms, where you're being inconsistent. And as a QA officer, I don't want to be inconsistent. I want to be consistent, but I also know that's just the nature of sometimes you get input, and depending on the exact circumstances, like I said, sometimes even your mood, you can give a slightly different answer. So the idea here was to put everybody in the loop. So when I'll get a question or a comment, something improvement, whatever it happens to be, and I'll evaluate it. If it's something that I think I can address directly with that person, it's not a big deal. I just send it back to the response. That's the yellow box above. I just send it back to them, and we have like a little conversation through the boxes, through the text boxes. If it's something I think that, oh, we hadn't really talked about that in our division before, or we haven't really addressed that, then I can send it to our QSM discussions. QSM is our quality systems. It's all of our seniors and our management, and we kick things around and we decide how we want to handle things and start making new policies or procedures that come out of that. And whatever comes out of that meeting will go into feedback that goes to the entire lab. The third option is I can just send a response back to the entire lab, because a lot of times what happens is somebody asks a question, you're like, oh, that's probably a good thing. If somebody's misunderstanding it here, well, maybe everybody's misunderstanding, or it's somewhere else. So being able to send that one answer to everybody, so everybody's on the same page, is nice. So this step right here is division-wide. When it goes to that step, everybody in the division gets it. I have a manual wait on that. Basically, I tell them when the email goes out, they get 2 weeks to respond. So there's a box in here that they can put a response into it. They put their initials and a response of, hey, I don't think I agree with that, or something like that. It opens up a little bit of a dialogue with the rest of the division, so everybody feels like they're a bit more involved. Also, when you're talking with management or supervisor, or seniors or whatever, you get one side of the story, but sometimes on the front line at the bench, they see it a little bit differently. So being able to get that input. So I basically say, okay, you got 2 weeks. Give me whatever input you have. And if I need to address it some more or answer some other questions, I can do that. Once that's done, if I need to update a document to make it more clear or a new policy, I'll do that. Otherwise, I just go straight to close. But then all these are in the system now for future questions, so I can again be consistent. If somebody asks me a question, like, I thought I answered that before, I can go back, look for the question, and say, okay, here's where I responded to this before. So again, it comes back to being consistent, because that's one of the worst things that I found that kind of kills people's trust in QA is when you're not consistent. As far as other things, we do have MDL or L validation. I'll tell you right now, we're not, for those of y'all in the environmental world that has the new MDL, we are not doing the new MDLs yet. We're kind of in trouble. But that's okay. So the old system, you had to validate your RLs and MDLs once a year. So we have that currently being sent in. And part of that workflow, it reminds us, that's the top one, reminds us that we have to go back into our LIMS system and update the limits and things like that. So it's a reminder for us, hey, because that was one of the things that was happening is we forget, because we just implemented a new LIMS at the same time we implemented Qualtrax. So it's just a reminder to QA, hey, we have extra steps and things that we need to do, and we need to keep track of that. The other part of what we used it for is for our LIMS implementation. I think that's where kind of Qualtrax has kind of latched on a little bit. Is like we had a 7-year implementation of our LIMS because the IT person that was in charge of it didn't manage the project very well. We finally got directive from the director of the utility that said, you will have it done by the end of the year. This was sometime the beginning of 2017. So you will have it done by the end of the year. So what was her response? She retired. I was the only other person that had worked on the project at all. Like this much. She would not relieve much control of the project at all. But I had the most. Plus, I'm probably the most computer savvy person we have on our staff. So not to brag, but I just am. I have coding experience. I have database experience, things like that. So I ended up becoming the de facto LIMS manager overnight. And I had basically 8 months to get it implemented. Something that somebody else that was getting paid to do it couldn't do in 6. So we had some challenges with that. So one of the workflows I came up with was this one right here. It's my work order Horizon issue. Horizon's our database. And basically, it just allows them to send me an issue. I had people helping me with the implementation. I taught them a little bit of the coding that needed to be done. I would disseminate the issue to somebody to fix. They would fix it, send it back to the person, ask them, did it fix the problem? If it did, it closed. If it didn't, it came back. And it was just basically a loop as a feedback way for us to keep track of these issues. Also, again, it became a library. I remember fixing that issue before. How did I do that? Well, now I can go back and look. I even have a little step in here for if it was above our pay grade and we had to go straight to the software people directly for that. So I would put a little box in there for their ticket number in their system so I could tie the two together. So when I got an email that said, this ticket was fixed, then I could go back to here and say, okay, well, let me see that ticket. I pull up that ticket, and now I can clean it out of my system as well. And then, of course, whoever had the issue always got it back to test it so that they know it got fixed. I will tell you, I get 1 billion emails every Monday from these. because all of these and all of these are in my inbox. Because I want to be able to see them, and I don't want to have to pull a report to see them, so I've assigned them to me, as well as the person actually doing the test fix, so I get lots of emails from those every Monday. But it's good. It keeps it visible. It reminds me there's some stuff out there. But this is kind of, I think, the thing that most people get impressed with. The biggest problem we had with implementing that system was convincing management that we were accomplishing the goal. I don't know how many people have ever implemented a LIMS in here, but basically every type of analysis that you have is a little module that goes into the system. And you have to build that module, and you have, a couple hundreds of these little modules that all have to get built and tested. And so what we had a problem with was they would say, okay, how many of these modules do you have finished? One week we'd say, okay, well, maybe we got 5 of them. Next week we come back, they say, how many modules do you have finished? 5. Okay, next week comes back, how many do you have done? 5. They're like, wait a second, you're not making any progress. You're not getting anywhere. I'm like, no, we are. It's just that it takes a lot to get one whole module fixed. There's a lot of little moving pieces within that module. So what we did is we came up with checklists. And so this is just a snippet out of that checklist. And you can see things that they had to add, that people were testing and were looking at. Things like, did the QC work? Are the limits correct? Are the units correct? Is it rounding to sig figs correctly? Whatever. All those little bits and pieces became a yes/no check mark. Then what we did was we exported this into Excel. This is not Qualtrax, okay? This is just what we did with it. We took it over in Excel, and we counted all those yes and no's. All the yeses showed progress. And so what you can see here is our progress of getting it performed based on each of the individual pieces rather than the big chunks, which is what they were asking for originally. So we were able to show them, even though we may not have had the whole packet of that test correct, we had pieces of it, and we could still show we were progressing and staying on task, even though it didn't look like it according to the original metrics that they had for the project. Because we were using the original metrics that they came with when they developed the project itself. They said, we're going to have this done by this and this done by this, and that didn't work for us. So being able to to break things down into smaller pieces and then report on them was good. So one of the things that whenever I've done lots of demos for Qualtrax, is that one of the things I like is it's not just lab. It's not just that. You can use it for a lot of things, and you can get creative. If there's something you need to track or keep on top of, you can build that in. It's not specifically for any one purpose. So that's workflows. Like I said, we kind of went backwards. I'm going to go real quick because I know I'm running out of time. No, I still got a half hour, don't I? Man, I'm doing good then. Any questions on the workflows? I'm mostly done with the workflows. So again, I mean, we haven't been using the training and testing all that much. We'd use it for a little bit for our annual stuff. You have your annual training that you have to do every year, ethics, safety, things like that. We do that in here just so we have a review of it. One of the nice things about this also, okay, behave. There we go. When we got audited this last time, we had always done like our ethics on paper, and it just had all I know that I will get fired if I do this, that kind of thing. And so this one's actually a fire extinguisher thing, but we had that in there, so I was able to pull up in one report everybody where they had answered yes to show that everybody had signed that affirmation of the ethics. And so I was able to just give them one big report that had all that in there. This is just one of my example tests for fire extinguishers, being able to, oh, actually that's what the top one is. The bottom one, this is the ethics I was talking about here, saying yes, I've done this. So they can check to make sure that everybody's been approved and stuff like that. So it's really easy for the auditors to see it in the report. Where we're going now, this is actually this is what I'm going to be doing during my collaboration this afternoon, is our ongoing DOCs. Ongoing DOCs are a pain in the rump. because you have so many people with so many different tests. That is just a jigsaw. I have 3 labs. All 3 supervisors track it differently. I do not have a single way. I cannot get them to get on the same wavelength to track it the same. So this is one way that one of my supervisors keeps track of her staff's DOCs. And it's all color-coded and stuff. I mean, I expect you to be able to understand or read any of that. The point is that it's not an easy task to keep track of all your ongoing DOCs. We still constantly having people lapse. As much tracking as we try, they still get lapsed. I created an Access database to keep track of all this. Nobody will use it. I know that one of our labs just says, okay, every January, everybody's doing their pH. Every February, everybody's doing their ammonia, whatever it happens to be. And again, it doesn't matter. I still have lapses in all 3 labs, no matter how they track it. So what we're doing now is we're going to try to use the training in Qualtrax to keep track of this. How exactly it's going to happen, I don't know yet. That's why I'm going to be doing my collaboration. But we do right now have set up a training for each of the different methods that we test on. And each of those are going to have with them a group of people that are proficient on that test. What we're trying to figure out is the best way to do the reminder system. And what it'll do is it'll send out a reminder to them, hey, you need to fill out the workflow. And we're going to have a workflow that says, this is how I did my DOC this year. Well, at least that's one way we're going to do it. The other way we've talked about doing is, one of the nice things about the training is when you submit your training, you can attach a document. So if they're doing a 4 standard, they can just attach that form to it. We still are probably for the foreseeable future going to be using some kind of an electronic form for the 4 standards. If they did a PT, they can just type in, okay, I did this analysis in the October round, or whatever. They can kind of document how they're doing these DOCs. Another kind of pie in the sky thing I'm trying to work on is doing control charts as the DOCs, so that 80% of the DOCs are actually done by QA rather than the staff themselves. I just go through and then I'll just tell them, hey, you passed your DOC, we checked your control chart, it works. Go into Qualtrax and submit your training. But the training itself will actually be submitted through here, and then what happens, we'll be able to go into the personnel or the training matrix, and when they get within 3 months, it'll trigger this, and then in 3 months, for those 3 months, it'll show, hey, you're due, and then once you get it done, then it takes it off. So we'll be able to see kind of who's due in the training matrix. At least that's the general idea. Again, like I said, we just started document control, so. I was going to show this. I wasn't going to show this, but when I kind of went over my presentation, I think it was with Deanna, she was like, ooh, that's kind of cool. You should put that in. I was like, okay. But these are the user things, the user-defined fields that we have on our documents. One of the things that was an issue is transitioning between our old Excel master list to the Qualtrax master list. And I am not going through every one of my documents right now and updating them, all the footers right now. It's just, I realize we have the document footer and all that stuff. It's great and wonderful, but it's more work than I have time for right now, because I'll have to have multiple versions and things like that. So for me, I'm leaving all the old footers there until we update that document. When we update the document, then we bring it along and start using the Qualtrax tracking. So what we have here is our kind of the tracking information that was there when it was first brought into the system. And then from there on out, now we know what the Qualtrax is. So if you look at a document and it says it's a revision 2, but if you look at the old master list and it says revision 13, that seems like there's a disjunct. You're just like, where did that switch? Well, now we have it permanently in our record that, well, version 11 was the last one in the old system, and then we started with the new system. So we kind of have a benchmark or a place that we can always trace that back. The other thing is, I saw this in one of the Qualtrax help things at some point. I don't remember where it was exactly, but changes to make the next revision. That's another thing that's kind of hard to keep track of sometimes. You're like, oh yeah, we need to fix that. And then we forget. I used to keep a sticky note on my desktop until my computer crashed and then I lost it all. So this was my fix for that. So now every time we come across like that workflow that's the suggestions or comments, if I don't want to make that fix right that minute, I'll come in here and I'll just say, okay, add so-and-so or add what and what, change this. And it'll be here so then when somebody does their review of the document, well, now they already have some changes they can make right off the bat. And then we do have our effective date. We're using that because obviously a lot of people know once you publish it, it's published. But a lot of times we like it published early so people can get trained on it. But that publish date is misleading. It makes you think that it's effective when it's not really effective. So we still use an effective date. We do not have this automatically in our header footers, like, the published status, the approver, the revision, document number, all this stuff is automatic with the little tags. We don't do this one. And the reason why is this is editable. If somebody ever changes this and for whatever reason hits that rerun the data automation thing, you're going to change it in the document. And now your effective date changes on the document and nobody noticed. So to me, that was a bit of a risk I didn't really want. So we manually type that number in just because I don't want somebody accidentally running that automation and messing up the footer. But that's one thing that we have to update, which is pretty small compared to what we used to do.